I am honoured and very excited to be joining everyone today. I was fascinated to hear where you're coming from all over the world. I'm also interested in to know what subjects you teach in the arts. So could you also just pop in the chat, are you a classroom teacher who includes art units or aspects of the arts in your classrooms or units of inquiry? Or are you an art specialist in drama, music, dance, one of the many delightful facets of the visual arts? Are you perhaps a curriculum leader here to support the arts teachers? Or are you a teacher who doesn't currently but secretly wants to teach the arts? I know there's probably a few of you out there. Business, deputy principals, kindergarten, lower, upper. What an array. Amazing. Visual arts, theatre teachers. Oh, we're all birds of a feather. Amazing. All right, a little about me. I'm a theatre, drama, English and humanities teacher, having taught across all year levels. Over the past 20 or so years in this exciting, ever-evolving, sometimes all-consuming, but very rewarding career that we chose, I've worn lots of different hats. I've been a teacher, a presenter, a curriculum writer, a department leader, an assessor, a committee member, and perhaps the most of all, I've been a learner. I'm also a mum of two busy teenage boys who I share with my husband. There they are in the bottom corner, and yes, they are all taller than me now. Currently, I teach at Cornish College in Melbourne, Australia. It's a really special place on 100 acres of land that affords an infinite amount of possibilities for our students to explore and inquire and create and learn. I'm also tasked with the privilege of leading the incredible teaching staff at Cornish on their concept-based journey. I've joined Rachel recently and the team at PLI as a coach and consultant, and I'm also really looking forward to co-facilitating the concept-based arts course with the fabulous Nissa Brown, which begins in January. Here's a little quirky fun fact about me. I actually have a cave named after me, the real dark, cold, underground kind. I grew up in rural Victoria in Australia, where limestone caves are plentiful. And my adventurous dad often took my brother and me along when he went caving. On one trip, we found an unmapped space. And because I was the only one small enough to squeeze through the entrance, I think I was about 5 at the time, I named it after me. While I don't do much caving anymore, I'm still a curious person who loves to explore new things. I've always got 2 books on the go, one usually about someone else's adventures and one about the adventures of education, which is ever evolving. About 8 years ago, my curiosity brought me to concept-based learning, and just like caving, I went in head first. About 3 years ago, I undertook my certification training, and this really was an excellent experience. If you're considering undertaking the course, I highly recommend it. I believe the classroom should be an environment where students can be active, curious learners who take risks. I want them to explore the arts in the way that challenge them, but ultimately help them find meaning. Before we get in today, I do need to remind you about copyright. You are more than welcome to take notes for your own personal use, and by all means, please talk about what you learned today with your colleagues. In fact, there's usually a recording of this masterclass after today that you can even share. We do, however, ask that you refrain from taking screenshots for your own recordings. All right, I've broken today's masterclass into 3 sections. The 3 A's for the arts: advocacy, alignment, and agency. Although it must be said from the get-go, these ideas are not isolated. In fact, they're often symbiotic, and I suspect you will see connections and overlaps as we go today. As with all good concept-based driven lessons, we will take a look at a few guiding questions under each awesome A. I wanted to begin advocacy from a case study. It's a personal one. From my time and experience in education, the arts historically can be misunderstood. I know. Don't get me wrong, some of its reputation is spot on. For example, the arts is fun. Lessons tend to happen in non-traditional classroom arrangements. They're often practical and physical in nature, which makes it inclusive and accessible. And the teachers are always really nice. Okay, I just added that bit, but it is true. Arts teachers generally are pretty nice. There's also this other perception. This is where it can be misunderstood, that the arts are easy and that they lack structure and academic rigor, and that it's a place where you go and just do stuff. Like all reputations, there tends to be a mixture of fact and perception, which isn't always accurate. I've always felt the value of arts personally, and I've seen its impact daily in my classroom. Conversations with colleagues and my own children's experiences reinforce this, as does the way we celebrate the arts in our communities and worldwide, as I'm sure you do. Yet again, to be honest, sometimes I still feel that it's not fully grasped what's truly learned in an arts classroom. The perception is that fun and engagement don't equate to meaningful learning. In the past, when advocating for the arts, whether at a subject selection night with parents, answering students who ask, why are we doing this, or presenting proposals to school leaders, I often centered my discussions on the topics we covered, like Shakespeare or mime, and the performances we planned. I might mention general skills like creativity, critical thinking, teamwork, and motivation, but I struggled to articulate it in any depth. I mostly focused on what we were doing, not why it mattered. Have you noticed this word do is coming up a lot? This left me feeling uncertain about my purpose when teaching units. So when students, parents, or administrators asked me why I needed a strong arts program, my explanations, though valid, felt incomplete and lacking the clarity I knew my classroom deserved. It wasn't until I began my journey with concept-based teaching and learning that I realized how my thinking needed to shift. Dr. Lois Lanning, whose work we'll look into more in a moment, wrote, "We need to move from doing to understanding why we do what we do at the level of concepts in the structure of process." For me, moving from this word do to understand was a game changer. Let me explain. Let's look at how we plan for arts-based subjects through concept-based approach. You may be familiar with this, in which case, bear with me, or it might be new to you. The structure of knowledge and structure of process has been drawn on the work by Dr. Learning Erickson and Dr. Lois Lanning. Together, the models of structure of knowledge and structure of process, complement each other. Dr. Erickson developed the structure of knowledge, and some years later, Dr. Lanning developed the structure of process to support subjects that are geared towards process and skills, such as English, languages, and design technology, and the visual and performing arts, which is where our interests lie. You notice between the two models, there are some particular similarities and some differences. Just briefly, for the purpose of context, I'll mention the structure of knowledge before diving a bit deeper into the structure of process. The structure of knowledge is geared towards knowledge-based subjects like maths and science. A two-dimensional curriculum traditionally focuses on facts and topics, the doing. If you take a look at the model and look from the bottom up, a three-dimensional concept-based teacher uses those facts and topics as tools and foundations in which to view concepts and generate generalizations, developing the three-dimensional conceptual understanding. Let's move on to the structure of process and our focus, which is slightly different. The structure of process represents the relationships among strategies, skills, concepts, generalizations, principles, and then theories. Because concepts in process-driven subjects can be drawn from processes, strategies, and skills, these actions are clustered together in the little box down the bottom. Beginning at the bottom box with skills first, these are the smaller actions or steps within strategies that, when applied effectively, enable the strategies to succeed. Concepts we may use in the mastery of technical skills could be drawing or painting, dance control, specific dance technique. In music might be reading music, analysing composition, and understanding rhythm and harmony. In drama, the use and manipulation of facial expressions, voice modulation, and gesture. Broader skills that may transfer within and across other disciplines like creativity and imagination, critical thinking and analysis, collaboration, and communication. Continuing up through the box. Strategies are structured plans that learners adjust and monitor to achieve their desired outcome. They are complex because they incorporate a range of skills within each strategy. Strategies might include brainstorming and mind mapping, sketching and drafting, improvisation, observation and imitation, or experimenting with limitations. Processes are actions that lead to a result and progress through stages. A process outlines what needs to be done, such as developing a concept. Processes might be the ideation and concept development, experimentation and exploration, refinement and rehearsal and presentation or performance, and not forgetting the highly valuable reflection and evaluation. Arts generalizations will come mostly from this structure of process. However, we do need one or two knowledge generalizations per unit too. Let's look at some arts skills that may lead to generalizations. Here's a creative movement unit for kindergarten or a foundation class. The student will be able to focus attention on others by listening and acknowledge their presence and interact with another, showing cooperation or sharing. From this, we may craft an understanding like to listen, turn, take, and work together helps to share one idea. Here's an upper primary music example. The student will be able to create original compositions, use listening skills, voice, and a range of instruments and objects to create effects. From this, we may craft an understanding like the student will be able to understand that musicians rework phrases, dynamics, or lyrics in songs to refine and achieve the desired effect. And in middle school dance, the student will be able to practice technical and expressive skills in style-specific techniques. From this, we may craft an understanding like the student will understand that dancers practice alignment and balance to execute control, posture, and effective dance technique. Here's one for the visual arts in middle school. The student will be able to collect and critically analyse feedback, identify skills and techniques in own and other work. From this, we may craft an understanding like the student will understand that artists reflect on their final product by assessing audience feedback, which may motivate the adoption of new skills or techniques and the direction of future projects. From this, and last but not least, a senior school drama class. The student will be able to identify key aspects of a script and its function, work within and overcome script constraints and director's vision, combine design tools or elements and design skills to scripted drama to explore and develop issues, ideas, and themes. The student will understand that manipulating and trialing different combinations of design elements within a production role helps to problem solve and overcome script constraints and incorporate the director's vision. Now I see that I only used to teach in the bottom section of the structured process and focused on the doing by using concepts and supporting students to reach a conceptual understanding. My teaching moved from a two-dimensional to three-dimensional model, giving students opportunities to transfer. Now, if we return briefly back to my point on advocacy, when I'm now having discussions with parents or co-workers or the community around advocacy for the arts, I'm able to speak with the articulation I know was possible. And in my current school, a whole school adoption of a concept-based approach offers a unified language between teachers, students, and parents. In fact, you might not believe this, but I actually don't get asked, what are we doing in class anymore? The games we play or the improvisation we engage in, the ones that I always knew had a purpose, are authentically connected to specific skills or processes that the student can articulate. It's fun, and they know they are learning. And when the students craft their own understandings throughout the unit, they understand it too. Isn't the expression, "oh, I get it now," not the sweetest thing to a teacher? Moving from doing to understanding and communicating is clearly, and communicating this clearly, I strongly believe is an excellent way to advocate that what we do in classroom is a rigorous and intentional and fun, and that, I think, is a reputation worth having. Awesome A number 2, alignment. In what ways can a concept-based approach connect the arts with other disciplines? The term alignment can be defined in different ways, as shown here. Looking at the first definition, while it has some truth, curriculum or learning rarely moves in a straight line, though I appreciate the idea of moving in a clear direction. The other two definitions resonate more with me. In an educational context, alignment can mean teachers collaborating to support student learning, help students make and transfer meaning, and to reduce cognitive load. When it comes to planning curriculum, arts teachers can often be left to their own devices, creating standalone units, and in some respects, we're lucky to have a greater level of autonomy. Other disciplines like English and humanities or science and technology tend to be the ones to connect and work together on units. Now, we know that teachers are natural collaborators and enjoy planning rich, authentic learning experiences. However, arts teachers can sometimes feel isolated, especially when they're the only ones in their department. Interestingly, in my experience, art teachers have a talent for spotting alignment opportunities, and there are plenty out there. We can spot opportunities when making decisions about using a disciplinary or interdisciplinary approach. I want to sidestep a moment and take a look at the difference between the two to provide some context, so bear with me. Through a disciplinary approach, our units stand alone with knowledge, skills, and understandings taught separately, which is fine. Through an interdisciplinary approach, we can see the integration of two or more disciplines around a common topic. Some learning integrates, but there is also subject-specific focus too. There is an intention to teach specific skills within that discipline. Also, as a side note, I did want to mention that if you wanted to explore more about these approaches, including transdisciplinary learning, which we haven't looked at, the amazing Raja Alhagan in August gave an excellent masterclass about the do's and don'ts of integrating curriculum. For those who did not catch the masterclass, I highly recommend it to you. Okay, now we've sidestepped and we've side noted. Let's get back on to track. Is one approach more effective for arts learning than another? In the book Worldwise Learning, Carla Marshall and Elizabeth Crawford state, we don't need to choose between disciplinary and interdisciplinary approaches. We can couple them intentionally to provide students access to different kinds of thinking. So using a combination of the approaches can be a great way for arts teachers to offer academic rigor, extended past being the vehicle or the medium to which to present knowledge or a product, while making authentic connections for students. To unpack this a little bit more, I'm going to show you an edited planning session for a Year 5 class to highlight how the teachers spot opportunities to connect and align in an interdisciplinary and disciplinary capacity. They are planning for 3 different units: English or literacy, sharing historical stories; a humanities and social science unit, migration in the 21st century; and a drama unit, characters are only as big as their status. This shows how the classroom teachers, Danny Barolo and Sam Miller, share their upcoming unit with the specialist arts teacher, me. I'll begin the clip with Sam sharing the English and humanities generalisations. While watching, consider, how does aligning with other disciplines change the learning experience for the student and for the teacher? Right, just bear with me while I can flip up. Oh, done it. This is very exciting. Rachel, can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear it when it starts playing? That'd be great.
All right. So historical narratives can inform and entertain an audience. Stories can capture a time, place, and event in history to inform an audience today. Authors research historical events to inform their writing. And then we've got writers use relative clauses to give more information about the noun, and authors create character traits to help the audience empathise with characters. So I was thinking maybe from a drama perspective, that character side of things might be really...
I've noticed that you're using the concepts of audience and character quite a few times. And what were some of the verbs there?
Inform and entertain.
I hope skill-wise, what I wanted my students to be able to do at the end of the unit was around the concepts of status and building character and looking at how they control those things on stage.
Once, so looking at the case study of the novel Once.
So just write the generalisation skills. So authors create
character traits to help the audience empathise with characters.
And we are very much looking at the novel of Once, which is about a little boy, Jewish boy, Felix, set in the time of World War II. And it's a story about essentially how he is navigating that climate and being confronted with a lot of very adult things, I would guess, that he's trying to hide in his own imagination so that he doesn't have to deal with it. So a lot of that is around that idea of, so the character traits that he has is this curiosity, but also this ability to think about the context and put it into a story so that he can hide himself from reality. And he does that with his little friend that he's met as well. So he shares stories with her to hide them from what's going on. So it sounds like there are lots of characters in this novel that I could utilise maybe parts of the novel to look at, I guess, status between the characters, so between Felix and the other people that are in the novel, and how he might feel as his status changes. I'm guessing that the stories that he creates, he is who feels more in control, and that might shift. I'm also wondering whether we could look at things like shadows. You said that they had as a friend. I'm wondering whether we could explore shadows as a way of developing characters and influencing the audience in a way that the audience knows that this is an important character but doesn't need to know the backstory. As novels often do, we have characters and they serve a function, but they don't necessarily we don't need to know all of the backstory for them. Is that something that would be worthwhile?
Yeah, definitely between Felix and Zelda. So Zelda, who's the other character, is probably quite a prominent character as well. But there are other ones in there that would fit that shadow idea because you don't hear much about them other than if you choose wood, then they play with their hair or like showing how they're feeling quite uncomfortable. But doesn't really state that. Yeah.
So we could look at theatre technologies of using shadow and light and build skills around theatre technologies and how that can, I guess, look at audiences. We can look at that. So, and I could look at skills of how to create status and what that looks like with different characters. So we can use sections of the novel. Are you reading it all together as a class, or are you reading it, students reading it at home, section by section? Are you using literature circles to support it, or how do you?
Mostly as a class, mostly as a whole class, and then at times pulling apart into small groups to look at a chapter.
So you won't read it all together, it'll just be chapter by chapter? Okay. So maybe we could look at our calendars and see if we can align certain chapters, and I could look at the characters within those chapters. If the students come with knowledge of that particular chapter, and you could possibly look at doing some character development. How do you look at characters?
So we look at the language that is used around the characters, and I'm thinking in particular when you were talking about status, there are several characters, especially later in the story, where he's starting to encounter some of the Nazi officers, and how perhaps our students could get a better understanding of potentially how they could describe that on paper if they've had that traumatic experience where you are playing with things like light and shadow to give those more sort of dominating characters that presence, because some of those characters are really quite scary and intimidating. So if they've had that experience, then they could come back and write about how they felt whilst they either watched it or as they acted it out, to give their writing more depth and interest. Because I find that, so often they're still talking about he looked cross, or he looked mean, or he sounded angry, but really sort of pulling on what they've done with you and their emotions that they actually felt. It might be really great to do some writing immediately afterwards if we've got some really good questions to just sort of guide their writing when they get back.
Okay, so the whole idea of emphasising as well, because I think it would be easier for them to emphasise, because this is a very far removed situation where they don't have a context to be able to connect to. So the next best thing to connect to is being able to simulate that type of experience. So that might be.
We're kind of noticing two different skills that we can look at in drama that will really align with this unit. I'm noticing the idea of character development and possibly the preparation that the actor needs to go through in order to establish a relationship with the character, or how to present it on stage. And I'm also noticing the idea of looking at how characters on stage show their status and the amount of control that they have with other characters, and that shifts and changes. And
from knowing once a little bit, I don't know the novel really well, but he goes through stages where he feels more in control and has higher status than at other times. And so that might be really interesting to look at. That will also support authors create character traits to help the audience empathize with characters. In a similar way, actors utilize expression, so expressive skills like movement and voice and gesture to show how to their audience as well. So are there any other case studies that you are looking at?
Yes. Yeah, because this aligns quite closely with our migration unit as well. So we're also looking at the migration from the 20th and 21st century in Australia. So one of the books that we're looking at is Arndo's Little Refugee, which is a picture book. So it's a bit shorter than Rank's. It obviously could be, without having to break it down, so could look at that in its entirety a bit more. That one, again, aligns a lot with what you're talking about with your shadow and your levels to create status.
There is this really cool learning engagement that you can use in drama to help establish the thoughts and the feelings that somebody might be having in a certain situation that the character might have. What we engage in is asking students to think about how somebody might have been in that situation in a careful and considered way. And it might be a question that I ask and ask them to put themselves in those characters' shoes. They think of something that they might be thinking at that time as that character, and then I ask the students to line up in 2 lines facing each other, and then the students take in turns walking through the conscience alley, and the students whisper as you walk past their thoughts. So they're not only having their particular thought about what their character might be through, but they also have 20 odd other thoughts that might have. And then we talk about the feelings that they are having when they hear those thoughts, and they're really powerful. And that might be really useful.
I'm like pointing to
yeah, that might be really useful to support what Felix is feeling and possibly what Arne is feeling as well.
Sounds great.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. And I think that would be really good even for more the factual historical recounts where you're looking at the Vietnamese boat people or Sudanese refugees. Now that if we read some of the case studies around those people, then hearing that, because then that takes it away from being, even though both of these have basis in history, being that real factual idea helps them to become even more empathetic towards our situation.
Yeah, I think we can do some really nice, authentic connections.
That's really
All right. I think I can get this working. Bear with me, people. I'm new to Canva. I was just telling Rachel before we started that I'm new to Canva and I'm starting to like it, but I'm still learning. I've been a slides person for a few years. Can everybody see that? Good. Awesome. All right. So, did you initially notice how the drama teacher, that was me, incorporated the existing case studies to dive deeper into the skills that are specific to the discipline? And notice that the teachers weren't adding any more work for their own units. They were just utilising what existed. Through further discussion, then the trio unpacked other case studies that could help to support their generalisations. Then later on, the drama teacher incorporated case studies that could be introduced specifically to suit their class. So I want to just revisit this question. How does aligning with other disciplines change the learning experience for the student and for the teacher? Let's start with students. Using the same case studies in multiple subjects can reduce cognitive load. They can support students to generalize. Multiple case studies can give variety and interest for students. They can offer more opportunities for retrieval of information over a period of time, and then the practice of skills for retention and mastery. And from a teacher's perspective, the teachers discuss opportunities to coordinate the timing of their units so that the student can leverage learning and case studies at appropriate times. Having more time in our classes is always a bonus. Multiple case studies can afford opportunities to differentiate for the particular cohort. Using generalizations to communicate intentions and guide planning helps clarify where the teacher wants the learning to go, making it obvious for other teachers. And collaborating is fun. Sharing when things go well and brainstorming solutions when things don't is a great space to work in. We all want to be part of that. Making authentic, meaningful alignments with other disciplines can make the learning so much richer for both student and teacher. Other ways we can align. Lots of art specialists teach the same cohort of students year on year as they move up either their primary or secondary schooling. I think of the primary art teacher in our school, and she teaches the same year level every year for 6 years, sometimes 8 if she teaches in the ELC. And this can be an advantage. Imagine beginning a new unit and being able to show a class-generated generalization from the previous year or previous unit as a way of revisiting understandings and reinforcing that transfer. Or with older students, create vlogs of their understandings and reflections on their learning. Share them on a Padlet so other students can see and hear their understanding. Then keep them in a central place for students to go back to them when they need to. And concepts can nest within each other, like those Russian dolls. Concepts can increase in specificity and complexity as students grow in age and ability. Disciplinary specific concepts can move from more macro to broader to micro more specific. This offers challenge for students and prevents overlap from year to year. For the teacher planning, it can offer clarity in scope and sequence. Here are 2 examples of concepts moving from macro, which is broader, to micro, more specific. Dance might be in the younger years using the concept of movement. And then as the students become more knowledgeable, they might use concepts like dynamics, weight, speed, intensity. And here's a visual arts example. The teacher might begin in the younger years using the concept of painting. And then as the students become more knowledgeable, they might use concepts like brushstroke, color application, layering, blending, and impasto. So this leads us to the last of our atomic A's. Can you tell by now, people, that I love an alliteration? Agency. So what is student agency? And how can using a concept-based approach in the arts foster that student agency? What is student agency? In the International Baccalaureate, especially in the primary years program or the PYP, student agency is often described as voice, choice, and ownership. Voice is about having students having a say in their experience. Choice is about students having an active part in the decision-making of their learning. And ownership is about being personally invested in the process. Why should we plan for student agency? Because when it all boils down to it, we want the curious, risk-taking cavers I mentioned at the beginning. They should be empowered to take an active role in their learning, be engaged, motivated, and responsible. When students have agency, they develop critical thinking, decision-making, and self-management skills, which contribute to their growth as independent learners. Planning for student agency also helps teachers create more responsive and inclusive classroom environment where students' voices, choices, and unique perspectives are valued. This approach not only makes learning more meaningful, but it also fosters confidence in a lifelong love of learning, or gaming, that's what interests you. We're pretty lucky in that the majority of the students enjoy our classes. They're practical, as I mentioned, they're hands-on, they're fun, and in a non-traditional teaching space that allows for freedom of movement. It is in this part because of the physical, practical nature of the arts and freedom to interpret and express our ideas in their own way that makes agency easier for us to attain. Today, our focus has been more on curriculum development than on classroom learning. So we're going to continue with the planning lens in mind. For our Year 6 PYP, How We Express Ourselves unit a couple of years ago, the teaching team decided on the topic of circus. While the transferable generalisation student worked towards had been the same for a couple of years, the teacher's choice to change to circus was intentional to meet the interests and abilities of that particular cohort. In other years, we'd chosen small musicals or productions. Students were asked to make decisions on various aspects, such as choosing their role in the circus after trying out each act, determining the audience's seating after testing different spots around the gym, selecting the element of their performance, and deciding on costumes appropriate for their acts. In music, students were tasked with composing the soundtrack for the circus. A skill the teacher was focused on was creating melodies, so the teacher worked towards the generalization that musicians try and test combinations of pitches and rhythms to form a memorable and expressive line of music. Students chose the section of the circus to compose for and had discussions with the performers about what they wanted their audience to feel from their scene. In drama, the teacher wanted to focus on processes that involved interacting with the audience. Through exploring skills like breaking the fourth wall, dynamic movement, and establishing suspense in their scene, all while performing their acts, the teacher worked towards the generalization that performers, interaction, moments of suspense, or pace that maintains excitement can keep the audience engaged in the story's outcome. And in the unit of inquiry classroom, amongst other things, students practiced their active listening skills and completed research into the roles and responsibilities in a performance. The teacher worked towards the generalization that successful group work requires active listening, contributing and understanding one's role in the production in relation to others. As you can see from the photos, the students' evening under the big top, or under our big gym, was a success, both in learning experiences and entertainment value. So opportunities for choice, voice, and ownership that we can plan for in a process-driven subject can include voice, creative input, sharing visions or inspirations for projects, self-expression, develop their own unique voice by allowing them to access personal knowledge and previous experiences such as beliefs or personal interests. Reflection, opportunities to reflect on their work and work towards and see growth. Choice. While some curriculum frameworks dictate particular styles of genres or art to study, many don't, which gives us the freedom to let students choose or at least offer a variety to work with in the topic or project that they would like to undertake. The materials or techniques such as the medium or the art form of sculpture or hip hop. We can also use the students themselves as case studies to practice skills and processes. Students love the chance to choose roles they undertake. Not all students want the lead or the primary lead role in a project. And ownership, planning. Students can set personal goals and collaborative plans to work towards individual and personal projects. And presentation in any form is often designed for an audience, so the stakes are higher. There is also a level of personal and group accountability involved in interacting with an audience. Through exploring skills, through interacting with their audience. And that, Rachel, brings our session to an end this evening. Thanks so much for your time. And I believe it's question time.
Yeah, so if you have any questions, please drop them into the chat so that we can explore them together. One of the things that I loved about the video where we see the collaborative planning with teachers is that the teachers weren't collaborative planning just around a big concept like change or form or function that we so often see, where teachers will say, oh, this unit doesn't really connect, but we can connect around a key concept. We heard the teachers actively using the case studies or examples, in this case the text, as the basis for the collaborative planning, and the connections became authentic and meaningful, not just something that was happening for the sake of collaboration or integration. So it was wonderful to see that opportunity for Lauren, the drama teacher, to leverage the fact that the students would have already read the text in another classroom. She didn't have to spend the time doing the reading, but she could take students' understanding of the characters that had been developed in the homeroom classroom to further develop her arts, which is fantastic. We also saw examples in the circus performance at the end where students, the collaboration wasn't just happening between the homeroom teacher and the arts teacher. The collaboration was actually happening between music, drama, and the homeroom classroom. All right, so there's a question here. I was teaching during the first, will the recording be available? Yes, so the recording will be shared. We usually send it out after a couple of days. The team should be in the office tomorrow, so they may be able to get it out tomorrow, and they send it out to anybody who has registered. All right, any other questions? Let us know in the chat. Lots of thank yous. Just give people a couple of minutes to see if there are any other questions that come up. How can we apply, whoops, hang on, I just lost it again. How can we apply the understanding to the doing? In the makerspace, children understand what to make, but need to apply that understanding to the making. So that's a good question. How do we move back and forth, really, Lauren, between the doing and the understanding, and how do the two relate and support each other?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because it depends. Like, I always think that skill and process, I guess, development can happen at just-in-time moments or at specific times in a unit. So I think when you might see an understanding but you want to see the skill development, or you need to check on those things, sometimes it's a good time to stop and work, I guess, backwards in that way, to look at whether they have that skill development and that they are making the connection between the doing and the understanding as well. In Makerspace, it sounds like Makerspace is usually a younger environment, and so understandings aren't always, I guess, written. Sometimes, they're verbalized or they can be shown in different ways.
Okay. The next question is, how can teachers support diverse learners in collaborative and inquiry-based language and literature tasks? So this is sort of moving into your role in literacy as well, Lauren. How do we make sure, and I think concept-based provides an amazing opportunity to support diverse learners. Do you want to speak to that, Lauren?
Yeah, well, I guess by looking at things like your choice in case studies offers a wide variety of opportunities to choose texts in this case, or pieces of writing or poetry or whatever it might be, that supports, I guess, some of your learners and the difference in learners, whether they need extra support or whether they are of high ability and need extending. We use, I guess, we can also look at and I guess test understanding by beginning with those facts and with those topics and testing the students and working through guiding questions that start with the factual and then move up into the conceptual. And, you know, the reality is sometimes we will have students that will, you know, that will sit at the factual stage, and we'll have to work really hard to get them to have those understandings. And some students will get those understandings really quickly. Other ways that we can, I guess, differentiate is that when we look at inquiry and I guess this is more practical tasks, so we're talking about language and literature, we can offer, you know, more group-based tasks. And that means that you can make careful selections on where you choose to put people.
I think the other incredible thing that we can do, and we saw this in your example, Lauren, is that we don't have to have all students studying the same case study. So you had said with the circus example, the students 1 year, they all had the same central idea for 3 years, but you switched out the type of performance in response to the needs of students. And that creates an incredible opportunity to share, to meet students at where they're at. So you had said that based on the skills and the interests of those students, you changed from doing more of a performance where they had to learn lines and remember particular characters or roles to more of a circus performance, which met their needs, and yet the same understandings were able to be achieved. There was maybe... Yeah, there was one more question, but there, I just want to touch on the circus. If you could share just a little bit more of a background into how you had students performing in some of the aerial acrobatics and some of those things, because I think the collaboration extended beyond the school, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. We had external group come in and support the students, which was amazing. And I think the unique thing about that was that, you know, when we talk about student agency and giving them choice, is that they got to test out, instead of us deciding based on, you know, what we knew about our students and our players, what they would do in the acts, we actually got them to test out. I guess we used the acts as case studies, and we got them to test out all of the different acts and have a go at, you know, aerial and, you know, the jumping and the rolling and the running on the balls and the trapeze and the juggling. And we got them to test all of them and try them out. And then they got to, you know, they got to choose. And it was amazing that they kind of made really, really mature decisions about what they felt comfortable with. But some, and I guess this is another way of meeting diverse learners, is that some were okay, but they actually wanted risk taking. And so they wanted to challenge themselves. And so they were like, yeah, I was okay with this, but I actually want to have to go. And those kids that were, you know, looking for those risk taking, they worked really hard. And then there were students who were nervous about things, and they tried, you know, they decided on their acts and they gave it, you know, they gave it their all. Usually in a production such as that, or a project such as that, we often have students who choose not to be in the light, and, you know, we will find, you know, we'll give them opportunities to do other things, which is perfectly okay. But in this instance, every single student performed, which was amazing. You know, we had tears from parents in the audience because they were, you know, so proud of the fact that, you know, the students that sometimes wouldn't put themselves out there did, you know, and they looked great.
Yeah, fantastic. There was a question about whether or not the paid courses were appropriate for teachers in different subject areas. So the arts course that starts in January is designed for arts educators or educators who are supporting teachers in the arts. So it's definitely appropriate also for curriculum coordinators and anybody else who is interested in supporting or advocating for the arts, and also classroom teachers who many schools around the world don't have the incredible luxury of art specialists. So if you're a classroom teacher and teaching the arts, that would be appropriate. Of course, we also have a literacy course and we have a science course if you're interested in those subject areas. And I run a course called Concept-Based Inquiry and Action, which includes teachers from early years right through to grade 12 and sometimes university professors in all subject areas. So definitely a broad range of offerings there. So one more question before we go, and then it is time to finish up. The last question was, in the unit that you collaborated on in the video, were the generalizations and principles shared with the students, or did they use the case studies to come to their own generalizations?
Yeah, that's a great question. We, I guess, a concept-based approach, we advocate for the students to develop their own understandings. We don't share them. I know in the IB, it's kind of common practice to display your central ideas or your understandings. But I guess, I always liken it to the idea that by sharing your generalizations is kind of like going to watch a horror movie or a thriller, and you sit down with the person next to you and they said, oh, he's the murderer right at the beginning. And you go, oh, I don't necessarily need to, I don't need to guess anymore, and I don't need to put the work in to try and work out who the murderer is. And I always think that that's a really good comparison to that. So we like the students to develop their own understandings. And, that's a great way of formative assessment to see that the learning is taking place, and then continuing to test that by getting them to transfer those generalizations into different situations.
And I think it's important to note that if you are working in an IB school, it's not a requirement from the IB that you share the understandings with students at the beginning of the unit. It has become common practice, but it's certainly not an expectation from the IB. The IB do advocate for both inductive and deductive teaching. So we're talking about inductive teaching here. And just on that note, a story, I was talking to a parent recently who was saying that in the maths class, when her child is in maths and another child calls out the answer, he said to her, Mum, that's when my brain just stops thinking because I've already heard the answer, so there's nothing left to do. And so it's the same thing in the classroom when we as teachers are telling them the understandings right at the beginning of the unit. There's no thinking left to do, so we've robbed our students of that opportunity. So we definitely advocate for the inductive approach. That's all we have time for today, so thank you very, very much for joining us in the session. We will send out a replay. If you have anybody else who needs to hear these messages or see what collaborative planning can look like in the arts, where teachers aren't just thinking about key concepts, but they're really diving into the content and looking for opportunities to connect, and then drilling into micro concepts like character and status to build meaningful connections. Thank you so much, Lauren, for your time and your preparation. It's always an honor to connect and share, and hopefully we'll see some of you on the arts course in January. Thanks, everyone.